Jacques Tati, born in 1907, is one of the most important directors of early French cinema. Making only 6 feature films in his life, he achieved respect and fame not only through his recognizably quaint style, but also through his innovative use of sound. For example, Remy Fournier-Lenzoni notes that Tati here is establishing a mutual respect between the instruments and the sea. Tati's films are based in nostalgic burlesque comedy and feature tropes such as the recurring character Monsieur Hulot, played by Tati himself. In addition, author Remy Fournier-Lenzoni points out in his book French Comedy on Screen, A Cinematic History, that these films are just as much part of post-war era cinema. It is through the comedy, however, that Tati is able to critique the changing political and social climate. Tati's use of sound to evoke humor ironically comes from his childhood hobby of mime. While many filmmakers from the transition to the sound era used comedy, Tati did not rely on it to relay his themes and messages. Burke Hilzebeck writes in an article that Charlie Chaplin depends on humor to symbolize darker themes. In an interview summarized by Lucy Fisher, Tati claims that Chaplin underused the full potential of sound. She continues by saying that Tati contrastingly casts sounds during post-production. Jonathan Rosenbaum writes that Tati always shot his films without sound and composed his soundtrack separately. In other words, Tati creates silent film that has synchronized sound. Even Michel Chion labels Tati's movies as part of mutism in deaf cinema. David Bellis helps distinguish between the methods of the two comedians by stating it is through music, not a street urchin's gag, that emotional contact is made on the final page. Tati's compositional and symbolic usage of sound effects are summarized by Lucy Fisher from a 1971 review. Laudry also claims that every sound and image that appears is there to create a certain meaning. Thus, he introduces the notion of Tati as a master of signs. In Tati's early short, School for Postmen, the bicycle becomes a humorous character through the ringing of a taunting bell. And just like the character of Hulot, these sound tropes string throughout Tati's films. Therefore, sound becomes a sort of compositional leitmotif throughout all of his films. Lenzoni supports this with, sound was omnipresent in Tati's universe, the bicycle bell, the cries of animals. Fisher summarizes Jean-Jacques Henry's 1979 article on Tati's sound. Henry also talks of Tati's disdain for conventional sound-image relationships and the tendency for Tati's sounds to fracture the image. The sound effect of the bumblebee is a disruptive break in the fabric of the narrative. It can only be heard and is used for comic effect at the expense of the main character. There's Tati's bell again. Because it comes from Hulot's nephew, a comparison is made. David Bellis notes that the movie's title would have us take the boy as the point of view of the film, since only he can call Hulot my uncle. Alternatively, we could take the boy as a mere stand-in for Tati, who would then be representing his own imaginary childhood mentor in fun. Do you hear those odd footsteps? Michel Chion notes, in Mon Oncle, Tati drew on all kinds of noises for human footsteps, including ping-pong balls and glass objects. This reinstates Tati's compositional approach towards sound effects. Music takes on a unique role in Tati's films. They are both thematic and emotive. Generally speaking, Tati's sound decor is composed of realistic elements. It is in relationship to this sonorous background that an untimely noise can take on an absolutely unreal dimension. In addition to the emotive aspect of music, in this particular scene is the critical characteristic of it. Music is diegetic in the urban factory world, but the same music becomes non-diegetic in the rural, humane world. Remy Fournier-Lenzoni comments on the usage of voices in Mon Oncle. There are human voices throughout the film, but aside from the scene in which minimal exchanges are perceived, all of the voices are heard through some kind of mediating technology. Like in Jour de Fête and Les Vacances de Monsieur Hulot, Tati used a synchronized soundtrack for the film's carefully composed and arranged music, while also employing strategic sound effects for comedic purposes, which range from mechanical noises in the factory to the automated noise of modern home appliances. Voices are not used as dialogue, but as music, like a soundtrack that accompanies a silent film.
Allô? Voulez-vous me donner le 24 à Saint-Maur? Mon beau-frère n'a pas le téléphone, mais quand on veut le joindre, on le trouve toujours à ce numéro-là.
Do you hear that same theme? It's diegetic now, just like the men's voices, which are not heard in the rural world. Lenzoni notes that one of his greatest inventions was to actually disrupt the raison d'etre of talkies in favor of the invention of another language. Tati modulated the sound, tampering with it, and finally invented his own sound universe. The multilingual quality of Tati's films reinstates the idea of them being part of silent cinema. Bellos adds that the silent cinema, unaffected by linguistic boundaries, could be seen as an intrinsically international art form. In film as sound art, Michel Chion argues that music themes in Tati's films operate as songs without lyrics because of the way they are repeated in both diegetic and non-diegetic instances. And as quoted from Chion, the melodies in his films are like so many sealed messages. The music is the envelope, and the text we never hear is inside. And here we have the music in its non-diegetic form in the rural world. The human voice, again, is part of the soundtrack in Tati's film Traffic. The non-diegetic whistling heard here is mimicked by a supposed diegetic whistle in this other scene from the same movie. The voices in this scene from Monsieur Hulot's Holiday sound like garble, but are actually carefully composed. And as previously mentioned, inaudible voices are all too frequently heard through some sort of foreboding electronic device. This scene from Playtime uses the same ideas and then adds the aspect of universality by having multiple languages spoken almost simultaneously by significant ensembles. The same happens in this scene from Traffic.
Bonsoir, monsieur.
Wie is daar?
En a bit.
Accident, camion.
Français?
Français, oui, oui, Paris.
Tu viens, ça?
On va à Amsterdam.
Can I have a look?
Oui, oui.
In conclusion, sound in Tati's films is unconstrained by the worlds of language and technology. Instead, the sound effects, music, and dialogue exist independent of the other details and create their own worlds and meanings. This innovative approach to sound effects, music, and dialogue is used today, such as with the film The Illusionist, adapted from and inspired by Tati himself.